Yes, I am Don Porter. I'm the release manager of Tcl'2018. I work at NIST, all of that good stuff. I think I've got more material than I can reasonably present, but I'm going to press ahead unreasonably and we'll just see how it goes. Cliff introduced this as the State of Tcl talk. I always feel uncomfortable saddled with something so momentous as the State of Tcl. I can't really talk on that subject, but I can tell you what happened in the last year, so that's the way I structured this talk. And here's the set of things I would like to talk about, looking back on the last year, and I'll return to this as we go. First thing is, we encountered in the last year an increase to the point of unusability at times on the use of our Tcl'.tk domain. We're finding that the .tk has a reputation of being a, what's the Star Wars line? Time villainy?
Yeah, something like that.
Anyway, a lot of folks don't like to consort with the .tk crowd to the point of blocking and to the point of downgrading search results and such. We had some problem with resolution many years ago, and we grabbed a hold of tcl'2018.org in that crisis. And this year we are starting a systematic approach of trying to migrate our preferred name from the .tcl'.tk to .tcl'2018.org. So whatever help you can provide, if you distribute URLs, if you could switch them over to the new domain, that would be helpful. If you notice that we're putting out old domains, you can alert us to that so we can get everything looking with a new name. That old name's going to keep working as long as you're not one of those poor souls getting blocked, but we want to be able to play well with everyone that's respectable. The other big event was the tip system has a new home, effectively, and a new engine behind it. Mark Jansen did the work mostly last year, but the final approval and the final turning on of the system happened since the last conference. The old tip system had been working since around the year 2000, and that was something you and I put together. I think it was like 90% you and 10% me. It was backed by CVS to keep its history, and it had its own markup language, because back in those days you had to invent your own markup language, because that's just the way it was done. But nowadays a lot of people come knowing a markup language. Markdown is very popular, and why don't we use one everybody knows instead of making them learn a new one to contribute a tip? We also had a problem with blockage. If you wanted to contribute a tip, really the only approved way to do it was send email to you so that you could enter it into the system and usually fix up the markup language. Yeah. Under the new system, this is all done in a fossil repository, and if you create your own account in that fossil repository, you can just create the document and submit your tip on your own. It's a lot less editorial burden to getting that done. As I say, Mark Jansen is the driving force behind this, creating the new system and also taking on the migration of all the old content, bringing it over. That's the tip, which is too small print to read anyway, but that's the tip by which he proposed that we do this. And this is the new system in action. One of the things that's nice about it, since it is fossil driven, it continues to get improvements. So just in the last week, you added this column. So now we have links for every tip to the implementation, whether it be a fossil branch or a patch in the ticketing system or any of a number of other things. So it's a better foundation, and it's letting us improve it incrementally in a better way too. All right, conventionally at this talk I look back on all the releases we made in the past year. So looking back on December of last year, we put out release 8.6.8. Had a lot of changes to the NMake build system for those of you who are using that. I know very little about it, but it was contributed by Ashok Carney, who's also the Magic Splat guy, the author of one of the recent Tcl books. Other than that, a few notable changes are some changes to array names, supporting back references, some expansion of the returns from info object methods and info class methods. And of course, as it always comes out in the patch release, lots of bug fixes. So look at the release notes and see whether your favorite bug was fixed or not. And then the next release we made in the last year was, oh, okay, that was it. So back to the main category here. I also usually look at the state of the fossil. So we look at the fossil repository and some of the key development branches that we have going and what they're for and what they're up to in recent history. The core 8.5 branch is still technically active, but it's freshly dead, is maybe a better way to think of it. We have not released anything from the 8.5 branch since February of 2016. I don't intend to release anything from the 8.5 branch, with one exception. When we finally push 8.7.0 out the door, my intention is to push an 8.5.20 out the door as a final gift to anybody who happens to be stuck using 8.5, and they can have collected bug fixes. But for the most part, if you're a user of Tcl, you don't want to be drawing from 8.5 because it's not active. And as a developer, you probably don't want to be contributing to it either. Only the really serious security type things, we want to fix those in 8.5. And if you've got a fix which just, it's exactly the same in 8.5 as in 8.6, I don't care whether you do it or not, it's fine. Otherwise, somebody comes and says, I've got this terrible bug in 8.5, won't you fix it, won't you fix it? Say, yeah, we fixed it, it's called 8.6, go get it. 8.6 branch is collecting bug fixes and producing 8.6 patch releases. If you have new features you think would be great to add to the language, that's wonderful, put them in 8.7. No more 8.6. And I give a variation of this talk every year, so I start with last year's slides and edit them, and I had this bullet point about how now that I had an 8.7 branch, 8.6 would be patch releases, we'd make regular releases, we'd get at least 2 of those out a year, because that happened. Yeah. Okay. Anyhow, the next release coming from this branch is going to be 8.6.9. This is new. New branch in the fossil repository for Tcl. We have a branch called Core 8 branch. And this is where work on 8.7 is happening. The branch calls itself 8.7 Alpha 2 right now, where new features can be incorporated into the language to go into 8.7. In particular, we're interested in features to add to 8.7 that lay a migration path down to get to 9. So a lot of the best contributed features here are going to be a tip which has a foot in both camps. Here's something I want to happen in 9, and here's something I want to put into 8.7 to help coders get there. That's what I hope a lot of the features in 8.7 are. Now we can also do more conventional things like, oh, let's add a new command, let's add an option. Those things are still good, but that's not what gets me excited. What gets me excited is the stuff that takes us a step toward 9. This branch, the Core 8 branch, isn't in TK. So let's continue on and talk about what the trunks look like in these repositories. The Tcl trunk is now calling itself 9.0 Alpha 0. And it is collecting the features that make it Tcl 9. We will make a release fairly soon, 9.0 Alpha 1, and that'll be the first Tcl 9 release. That'll be a very exciting time. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. Meanwhile, the TK trunk is working on TK 8.7. It calls itself 8.7 Alpha 2. It's a place where you can put new features going to TK. The next release there is going to be 8.7 Alpha 3. And the idea here is that TK 8.7 is meant to be a package, an extension, which extends either Tcl 8 or Tcl 9. And it's meant to be an example to extension writers. Here's how you can write an extension which will be a package for Tcl'8 and a package for Tcl'9. And this is important because once we release Tcl'9, if we had a new version of the language which had no packages, I think it would really slow adoption. But if you've got pretty much every package already in existence for 8 with a few minor changes, now it can be an 8 or 9. I think that'll really help us get over the migration hump to get people to move from one to the other. That's what the fossil branches look like. I'm going to get one. Not too terribly. So, since I didn't have releases past, I have to tell you about releases that are coming very, very soon. 8.6.9 is ready to go out the door. I had hoped to release it yesterday. It didn't happen. It's happening, I describe it as pending. So, handful of changes in there of note. One I would call attention to, colored it in red just because it impresses me as something you might want to take a good look at. The exec command on Windows has revised the way it quotes the command line arguments. There were some security concerns with the quoting system it was using, that certain well-constructed values might cause things to execute that you didn't intend. So take a look at that change if you're in that situation. If you're using Tcl on Windows and you're using exec, you might want to check how this change influences your code. Some really good work on the HTTP, cleaning up some problems with the keep alive connections, and lots of bug fixes. And here I want to especially call out the folks working on TK. I was called to my attention that over the last year, is it Francois alone? He's kind of the ringmaster, so whether it's him alone or...
There's only like 3 or 4 other bug fixes that are not done.
Yeah. He has averaged 5 closed tickets a month for the entire year in TK, and some of these are tickets going way back, really doing a good job of just clearing out the backlog. So TK is really doing great, with one sticky exception, which is Mac Mojave has come out, and they've changed something in their drawing interface, which wipes out TK basically. These guys are really working hard now. Their messages say they're hopeful. Their messages say they're making great progress, so I'm hopeful too. And hopefully by beginning of November, we'll have this release out, working on Mojave. I like to do these things in sequence, so once I've got 8.6.9 patch out, then I like to move to 8.7 so I can truthfully say, hey, 8.7 includes all the bug fixes you had in 8.6.9. It's just a housekeeping task that makes things easy for me. 8.7 has had a lot of activity in the last year. We had a release of 8.7 Alpha 1 just before the conference last year, and that already had 9 new tips in it. Since then, we've got about 30 more. And I've got them laid out over the next 3 slides. I've highlighted in red the ones I think are most likely to possibly be of concern. And so I would suggest that if any of the keywords in there look like something that your code cares about, take a look. When the release comes out, try it. The important thing is that this is an alpha release, so we're still at the place where if we've taken us down a terrible direction and it's going to destroy something that's important to you, there's still a chance to choose a different path. So please take advantage of that opportunity. So we're working towards Unicode support past the basic multilingual plane, get all those emojis into our work. We're working toward going to thread-enabled builds only. I think we're at the point where we can do that. We have a great new zip file system archiving, which probably the short way to describe it is it supplies all the tools needed for Tcl kit-like building of applications right in the core distribution. Some important integer changes I think people are going to want to be aware of. The native integer in Tcl has been the C long type for a very, very long time. And what's happening is we're switching it so that the native is going to be what we've called the wide integer type. If you work on a system where long and wide are the same thing, which is I think most people now, this will not be a change. But if you're on 32-bit systems, you might want to examine how this set of changes is changing both potentially the functionality of Tcl and even more so the performance possibly. A lot of OO changes, which I don't really understand, but you can ask Donald if anything interests you. Whole page here of just traditional new commands and new options that have gone into 8.7 already. The one that caught my eye is Tcl process. This is an answer to a bounty from FlightAware, and it's essentially another command offering, I think, the functionality of exec and the functionality of open pipelines. Hopefully it, maybe sort of kind of,
It enhances what you can do with the existing.
it's in that ballpark of functionality.
Yes.
It's about sub-processes and managing them. So if exec has not been making you happy and open pipelines has not been making you happy, you might want to give this a look and see if it addresses your worries. The canvas image is kind of interesting. It's a way of taking the contents of your canvas and actually turning it into a TK image. So that's a functionality that I guess hasn't been around up until now.
Well, it wasn't the image extension. You had to have the TK image extension, and there was an extension to the extension that actually did it.
All right. Otherwise, lots of interesting things here, but in the interest of time, I'll skip on by. And then you always have some tips which are kind of on the boundary of new features versus bug fixes. And we have also a number of things here where we're starting to shove old and broken things out the door. This is, in a sense, in the spirit of that, let's make 8.7 a migration step to 9, where the things that we believe we could do away with in 8.7, we're going ahead and doing away with them. And we will see whether we get any pushback on these things. And then Tcl TK9. And I should have made that Tcl 9 because it's not going to be a TK. So imagine that correction made. So here are tips that are already in the trunk, already ready to go in 9.0 Alpha 1. The first collection is primarily removing things that, for one reason or another, a lot of people thought was a bad idea or broken or poor design or just not supported anymore. And so testing against the trunk will help you discover whether you actually cared about the loss of any of these things. And then the second part is in with the new and amazing, and you may notice if you flip back through these in your own time, a lot of these tips were also tips in the 8.7. It's one of these migration type things where we can get partway to Unicode support in 8.7, and then the aim is get all the way in 9. And it's going to take a secondary tip to get there, I believe. Lots of interesting things going on there. And since this is a talk about what we've done in the last year, that's where things are and essentially just about ready to go out the door. We have more things going in, more plans for 9 than this. But since that's in the future, I'm left those things out of my talk. Back to the main thing. That's essentially the things that I had prepared. I traditionally have a new business item at the end of this talk where I could open up the floor and say, well, what did I forget? What else happened in the last year that somehow didn't make an impression on me but made an impression on you? And the interesting news, which is just coming out in the last couple of days, is that the new wiki engine is finally up and live and going. It's the Nikit software that's doing that. And Josh DeCoster and Steve Landers are, I think, the leading forces. We have to thank for that work. There may be some other hands in there as well. Here's live view of the wiki page being driven by this new engine now. And so, master of understatement, they've got just one bullet in the community news. Oh, we've got a new engine running this cycle. And then there's a link there you can go to about Mickett and learn all about the new things it makes capable and so on. So I actually did blow through things within my time. I did it unreasonably, so I'm sure I left a lot of questions, and hopefully I had a few minutes to entertain those. So any of that blur that went by that you'd like to hear more about or have clarified?
What do you think we'll see?
Hand in the back.
In one photo message, let's attack the Sergey beast. So all the big patches, I would say, from Sergey. Is there any progress or any plans or any help required, I would ask?
Okay.
Yeah. So it's about the date reform, date speed up, and well, there's lots of...
Especially the clock is the big one. Yes, I have good intentions in that direction. It is difficult. I don't know what else to say other than I'm not trying to put him off, and I'm not trying to ignore the work. It's clearly good work. It's just also difficult to review for me. So, to continue to examine that.
With the change in the domain name, is the same content going to be served on both domains?
That's my understanding.
You just have to be careful to classify search engines because if they see duplicate content in two places, then they're ready with your search ranking. So one of them will have to point to the other as the canonical.
I see. Try to make sure that information gets to the people who can make use of it.
Yeah, I mean, how do they handle CDNs?
CDNs are typically distributing assets, and often not on a different domain name. So it just happens to be on your region where that DNS will point you to an IP of the local distribution center.
I mean, in this case, it actually winds up being two addresses pointing to the same IP.
But it's a different address as far as the search engine bots are concerned.
Maybe we could just nominate TK to be the regional mirror for the Tcl'2018.
There's a tag you put in the header that says this is the canonical URL, so that bots know this is the duplicate content, and if they want to serve a hit for something that would match this page, they serve it to the canonical URL.
Okay. The people that really need to know about that are Mark Jensen and Steve Leonard.
I don't recognize Rad Tickle as something I know about. So, if you have something to say, you're welcome to.
All I really know about Rad Tickle is that Steve Landers preserved the name, and the Tickle Community Association is paying for it. I don't know what's being done with it.
Okay. I don't know anything about it.
Okay.
So when do you think the 8.7 will...
My best guess is that it's looking like 869 is going to probably push to around November 1st. I would get this out hopefully within another week or two past that.
So the main thing holding up 869 is the Mac?
This is the Mojave. Otherwise it's ready to go, I think. And if they surprise me and they tell me Mojave's ready in 2 days, then we get it out. But I don't want to overpromise because I know they're facing a pretty difficult task. 8.7 and 9, since they're alpha releases, there's less concern about that nth degree of quality, so I don't have too much trouble just turning the crank and getting them out. But I do like to do them in sequence.
So you mentioned the zip archive new feature. So if, in the STX kit there are some update features. Is there going to be any update feature? can update zip archives in a
In,
reliable
in,
way.
in what kit you say?
STX kit, which is we use for creating star kits.
Okay.
There's an
Can-
update.
Can you address that because it's getting out of my expertise?
Okay. The support is only invoked if you're using a normal Tcl shell. So all the folks who use a custom kit, they just, if you're using your current startup mechanism, it's not going to conflict at all. There's a fallback that the new shell will use that invokes the kit behavior that if you're using an existing bit of code isn't going to call it at all. So all the old hooks are still there. There's an additional hook that says, hey, make me kit the core way. And if you just don't call it, then the functions are available to manipulate zip files, but you don't have to use them. And in fact, most kit builders will just be providing their own VFS tools.
So are you talking about something that you could make into a start pack by attaching a start kit to it?
Well, we don't, well, in this case, it's a zip file system, but the start kit uses a different VFS mechanism and a different, basically hijack the shell startup process to tell Tcl, okay, here's how to load the VFS, and once you load the VFS, here's where Tcl library, TK library, ITK library, iTcl library live. Those mechanisms haven't changed, and so if you're writing a kit and your C code can tell Tcl better about where to find these things, that is still going to be where it goes. This is, if you don't, there are now facilities for Tcl to go out and grab Tcl library out of the local executable, or the end of the DLL, or a zip file that's got the right name.
So the objective is simply to be able to create a single file executable without any wider ambitions, is that?
Well, it's a single file executable without any wider ambitions. It's also to be able to distribute Tcl as just the DLL without having to install a whole bunch of things in the script pack, because a lot of operating system distributions are starting to play games with, well, we want the binaries here and the script files here, unless it's the second Tuesday and the month that ends in R, at which point we want them over here, here, and here. And so basically we get out of the business now because all we have to ship is the library.
It's always been a point of fragility in a Tcl installation that you have the binary library, but it also needs a script library to be fully functional, and at runtime they have to find each other. And there's lots of ways that can go wrong. So if we can at least provide one way where it's harder for it to go wrong, then we're less likely to have trouble. That's part of the motivation. Besides just being cool. Anything else? All right, thanks everyone.